In this exciting episode, we go from Utah to California and find that a pair of legs that brought you luck in Cloverdale just aren't doing the same kind of work in LA. Also, I guess men like Bob Dore wear their pants really high in Utah, expecting a flood from Salt Lake City, son? It's Perry Mason, Season 3, Episode 10, The Case of the Lucky Legs. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose here is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do an episode of every episode of the television series, and as time permits, I'll get to some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were originally aired. Each episode, I give you a brief refresher on the plot, and then compare it with Earl Stanley Gardner's novel, if it was adapted. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia before tackling the episode's theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a pearl of wisdom from the man himself, before heading to the post-case water cooler where, just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! Each episode in the Law Library, we investigate some legal conundrum in the episode so we can find fresh precedents for future cases. In this visit to the Law Library, we get a look at the shady world of contract law. Frank Patton sold Margie Clooney a bill of goods concerning her good time gams, and J.R. Bradbury wants him punished. Perry knows that's a tall order. He explains why.
You'd know if the district attorney thought he could get a conviction on the basis of this contract.
Well, Mr. Berger did say that the man undoubtedly was a crook, but it was a question of proving criminal intent.
And so it is.
Typically, the prosecution doesn't have to spell out criminal intent because it's implicit in the criminal act. But here, the contract is on the up and up. Bradbury, Margie, the rest of the Cloverfield gang simply didn't read it closely enough. The case of the reckless readers. So now they gotta play mind reader and get Patton to out himself. Too bad Patton ends up dead before anyone can tell us his thoughts. That means it's time to get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Lucky Legs. Our scene, Cloverdale, Utah, a town that incidentally doesn't exist, though there are more than 10 Cloverdales in the United States scattered across different states. I smell an alternate Paul prompt. But I'm burying the lead. Marjorie Clooney, ladies and gentlemen.
And now the announcement you've all been waiting for. The winner of the contest to choose the girl with the lucky legs is number 3. Cloverdale's own Marjorie Clooney.
Marjorie's caught the eye of a couple of men. Frank Patton, of course, the founder of the Lucky Legs feast.
Folks, for the record here and now, let me prophesy a meteoric career for this lovely young girl from Cloverdale. A career which will establish her as one of Hollywood's brightest stars.
Man, I thought that guy was Wilton Graff, a.k.a. the guy that was grooming Jimmy Castleton in the case of the fraudulent photo. It's not, though. It's an actor named Douglas Evans. Then there's mustachioed R.J. Bradbury, a.k.a. Frank Maddox from the case of the sleepwalker's niece. Did anybody else know we were headed for trouble with that Lothario on the case?
She was my secretary. If that contest hadn't come along, I think it's safe to say that by now she'd be my wife.
And hothead, pull up my pants above my navel, Bob Dore watches all he can on TV before making his way to the studio.
I've stood by and watched you put over this fake promotion of yours, lining your pockets at the expense of our local merchants. But I don't care about that. No, that's just money you're taking out of Cloverdale. Margie is something different.
Next thing we know, it's a month later and Bradbury is seeking Perry's help. It seems Marjorie's gone missing. Bob's not far behind. He barges into Perry's office hot on Bradbury's heels. But he has had the good sense to lower his pants for his visit to the big city. Perry and Della decide to pay a visit to Patton, and on the way into Patton's apartment, they see someone with unlucky legs. When they actually get inside Patton's apartment, they see that Frank Patton's been super unlucky.
Is he dead?
Stabbed with a wood carving knife.
Perry's on the case immediately. He gets to Marjorie and finds her in the care of former Lucky Legs winner Thelma Bell, Gene Cooper. They have their story down pat. Or do they?
You're the man I bumped into.
Right in front of his apartment house.
And you told the police?
No. But why shouldn't I have told them? Because you were in Patton's apartment about the time he was stabbed to death?
No, I wasn't. Stabbed?
With a wood carving knife. Or shouldn't I have talked to the police because there was a phone message from you on a table in his living room?
But she didn't kill him.
How do you know?
Because she told me so.
High Water Bob shows up, and the chase is on. Then Frank Patton's neighbor does the unthinkable. She imitates Della Street.
This is Miss Street, Perry Mason's secretary. The message is, developments indicate a long trip advisable. Suspicion mounting in M's direction.
Don't be fooled by imitations, accept only genuine Della Street legal advice. We've got a handful of suspects as the case goes to court. There's Thelma Bell. She's hiding something, but is it murder?
Then you were the one Miss Fields heard screaming something about Lucky Legs.
Well, I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, all his lies about trying to give me a break in the movies and... Well, I blew my top and I bawled like a baby, so... I was fixing my face in the bathroom and... I heard this fall.
No cry, no scuffle?
No, just one great big thud and...
How about Laura Fields, the ersatz Della Street, and heard the body drop in the Patton apartment?
Photostatic copy of your marriage certificate.
That's past history. We've been divorced for years.
Yet you still lived in the same apartment house.
Yes.
And you knew his telephone number.
Yes. I still felt as if I were married to him.
And that's why, after hearing the commotion, you went up the fire escape and, suspecting something was wrong, then telephoned the police.
Yes.
What about Bob?
Did you visit the defendant at Thelma Bell's apartment on October 3rd, the evening of the murder?
Yes.
Was it between 5 and 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Did she show you this knife? Answer me, did she?
Yes.
What did she say about it, and what did she then do with it?
She said it was to be a gift for me.
That just leaves Bradbury. Turns out the dude lined Patton's pockets to make sure Marjorie didn't succeed in Hollywood. He regrets it, but as for the murder itself?
I didn't have to bribe Patton. He was a faker and a conniver, just as Doré said. But Margie wouldn't have had a ghost of a chance out of that contest anyway. That I didn't have to start the whole thing. I wouldn't have had to end it. But he needed killing anyway, didn't he?
In our denouement, Marjorie makes a case for Perry being smarter than he actually was. And Della's got a name for that.
I wouldn't call that a guess. I'd call it a logical deduction.
I see a great career ahead of you, Margie, as a diplomat.
In our identifying mark watch, Tragg had a chance to leave his insignia on the carving knife, and he passed it up.
And can you identify this object?
Oh, yes, that's the murder weapon.
Opportunity missed, Arthur. For the first time this season, we have an Earl Stanley Gardner novel adaptation. Let's count the ways of its similarities and dissimilarities to the television adaptation. The 1934 novel, the first in Gardner's Mason series to boast an alliterative title, features the same murder victim and murderer. So what are the differences? A, not set in Utah. Cloverdale appears to be in California. B, no court sequences. Margie never appears in court. Mason solves the case before it goes to trial. C, fun in the sun regarding how Mason wants to handle Frank Patton. Mason goes to the district attorney. This is before Gardner introduced Hamilton Berger, and gets the okay to pursue Patton, and then plans on using rough guy tactics to extract a confession while Patton has his words taken down by Della. No lie, Mason was going to get Patton to talk under duress. I don't think Mason was planning on using a knife, though. D, Perry discovers the body on his own, not with Della, and sufficiently disturbs the scene by locking Patton's apartment door so that when Bradbury finds out, he puts the screws to Perry to take the case and defend Marjorie, because if he doesn't, Bradbury will implicate Mason for the crime. You want a quick summary of early Mason novels? This guy's discovering bodies everywhere and always getting himself implicated as a possible suspect in the murder. E, novel plot point. Marjorie and Bob run away for a week before she marries Bradbury. She plans to marry Bradbury. She's going to be his bride, but she wants to give Bob a week of bliss. F, the novel features no allergic to nylon or wood carving plotline. A bread knife does the job. That's what we get. G, some additional plot details. Bob is a dentist in the novel. The woman across the hall, not Frank Patton's former wife. Instead, Bradbury has another Lucky Legs contestant named Eva Lamont come to town, and Bradbury has her start mucking things up. She's the one who impersonates Della, and she even hires Paul Drake and leads him down the primrose path where he does Perry wrong. And then H, the novel got turned into one of the Warner Brothers 1930s Perry Mason movies. Not that great. And there's a radio-esque dramatized version from 2011 that you might want to check out. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is something about a particular actor or actress in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode concerns the L.A. wood carving market. Listen to what Bob was doing in an attempt to make ends meet.
You okay, Bob Dory?
Yeah, he's the woodcarver, all right. He needed dough, so he sold one of his figurines to a little art shop on Alvera Street.
He could hide enough wood to build a tree house in those pants. Our Paul prompt, could one just offer up wood-carved creations to local art joints in 1959? What kind of price could Bob hope to receive on the open market for his art? Our Della for this episode is Michael Miller, the hot-headed Bob.
You'd better treat her right in Hollywood. Do you understand me, Patton?
Well, we don't have 10 about our dude, Do-Ray, but his fascinating story leaves me wanting more. Here's what we've got. Number 1, he was born in L.A. in 1931. 2, he played roles on Broadway in Ivanov and off-Broadway in Under Milkwood. He appeared at the American Shakespeare Festival, the New York Shakespeare Festival, and productions around the country. Number 3, his IMDb bio, which appears to be written by one of his 3 sons, shows that he was proud of his roles in 4 1970s films: The Anderson Tapes, 3 Days of the Condor, Have a Nice Weekend, and The Front. Number 4, married to a woman named Eliza, apparently lived in NYC despite being born in LA. Number 5, in 1983, he was in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, filming a public television production of Pudd'nhead Wilson. He died of a heart ailment on the set. He's not part of the production, which aired the next year. Number 6, his short obit appeared in the New York Times and I have searched in vain for more info. You know, one of the craziest comments this podcast has ever received came on YouTube for the episode I did about the case of the borrowed brunette, which featured John Stevenson as Grant Reynolds. And the comment on YouTube just said this: John Stevenson was my dad, which is crazy. John Stevenson's son, I believe, was listening to the podcast. So if you're somehow connected to this Michael Miller, by the way, there are like 75 different Michael Millers involved in the Hollywood movie making business to get you onto IMDb. If you're somehow connected to this guy, Michael B. Miller, I believe, and you happen to be listening to this episode, let us know more about this guy. What a tragic end. Our Perry for this episode involves our intrepid hero's memory. You remember the situation. Perry's seen a phone number inside Frank Patton's apartment and recalls that it's the same as Thelma Bell's. Della is wowed.
Isn't Crestview 73891 the same telephone number that Paul gave us for Thelma Bell at the St. James Bungalows?
They're the same. You and your memory for phone numbers.
You should see what he can do with the penal code, Della. Our theme for this episode? Luck. Lucky or not, you decide. 1. Marjorie getting selected as the Lucky Legs winner. Lucky or unlucky? Marjorie getting tossed over rather quickly by Frank Patton. Lucky or unlucky? Marjorie getting on with a former Lucky Legs contest winner to make ends meet. Lucky or unlucky? Bradbury consulting Mason. Lucky or unlucky? Marjorie running into Perry outside the Patton apartment. Lucky or unlucky? Marjorie getting nabbed at the border before she can get to Mexico and marry Bradbury. Lucky or unlucky? Marjorie winning the case, but apparently getting stuck with Bob. Lucky or unlucky? Perry managing to get his client off for a crime she didn't commit. Lucky or unlucky? They say shallow men and women believe in luck. Perry's done this routine enough times that I don't think we can call that last one lucky anymore. Now, let's hear a Perry proverb. Our Perry proverb for this episode comes from Perry's confrontation with George Sanborn, beau of Thelma Bell and prizefighter. First, we get an appetizer to the proverb with this exchange.
I heard of you, an attorney.
I heard of you, a prizefighter.
That's right. 19 KOs.
How many against attorneys?
Then Perry goes for the KO. Sometimes a rhetorical question says more than a declarative statement ever could.
You both had bourbon on the rocks, you both had rare steak sandwiches, you both had double bourbon highballs. Haven't you any imagination?
Yeah, don't you have any imagination? You're headed into the ring with the heavyweight champion, George. You got into the ring like you were going to have a thumb war instead of rhetorical fisticuffs. Perry's going to win that one every time. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
You know, there is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Each episode in the water cooler, we offer deleted scenes where we imagine some sequences that didn't quite make the episode's final cut. Number 1, an Unlucky Legs contest features all the men in Cloverdale, Utah. Loser has to wear pants for the rest of his life. Number 2, Bob finally manages to get his pants up under his armpits. A triumph for modern slacks makers everywhere. Number 3, we get a montage of Bradbury saying, well, he needed excuses for housing 5 hamburgers. They needed eating anyway. Pouring water on an unsuspecting janitor's head. He needed bathing anyway. Giving away his treasured lawn equipment. The lawn needed to grow into a jungle anyway. And number 4, Marjorie goes around giving good spins on everything. Della's not a secretary. She's a vice president. Paul's not a PI. He's a Secretary of State. And Bob, he's not a high water pants wearer. He's the head admin of FEMA. Our Paul last time concerned the price of airfare circa 1959. Both Surratt Winslow and Ralph Curtis flew from NYC to LA, and Ralph followed that up with a trip down Mexico City way. Come fly with me. So we asked, how much would these flights have cost in the year of our Lord 1959? Moreover, what airline would Ralphie have flown down south? The one answer I found indicated that a flight from New York City to LA circa 1960 would have taken 13 hours, cost the equivalent of $1,600 in today's cash, and would have included a stopover in Chicago. Yikes. More fascinating to me was the reason for the high price of flying in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Until the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978, airlines were considered a public utility. Airfares were set by the federal government, which ensured that airlines made more than enough money. Even after deregulation, a basic domestic round-trip airfare in 1979 was much higher than it was, say, in 2016. I had no idea. As for the answer to what airline Ralph would have taken to Mexico City, the answer, you probably knew this, Pan American, which first started service into the Los Angeles area in 1939 and in the 1950s introduced non-stop service to Guatemala and Mexico City. So William Wyatt was getting the Pan Am treatment. Gary wrote in to say, very happy new listener here. I recently started rewatching the series when I found it was available on IMDb. I'm now listening in sync with the episodes I'm watching. Loving it. My question, who is the bust next to Perry's door? It looks sort of French royal court-like. The answer, Gary, thanks so much for listening. It's supposed to be William Blackstone, a British jurist. This is per the novels. But in all likelihood, the bust in the show is Voltaire, the French philosopher. Perry was a hat guy for like 2 episodes in season 1, and in the novels, the bust is intended as a hat stand. In the show, it's just sort of sitting there looking French royal court-like. I also got a delightful message from Catherine Searcy in Des Moines, Iowa, who writes, quote, I am new listening to the Perry Pod because I do not have all the episodes in my memory, as do some people in my family. I found that on MeTV, Perry comes on daily at 9, now in my city. I found that this summer, I have more space to watch Perry than to look up your podcast to match and listen to it. And when I tried before, I couldn't remember the details enough to make your comments enjoyable. I often start by thinking, is the podcaster a law student? His mind works like a lawyer. And I know a few folks who listen to the Perry Pod and they love it. Thanks so much, Catherine, or should I say, Aunt Kathy. I went back through a lot of messages from listeners this week and was shocked by just how consistently my father and my Aunt Myra have sent in responses to the Paul prompts. It was a delight to receive a message from Aunt Kathy this week. Thanks also to Marge, a listener who wrote early in season 1, this would have been in 2018, I think, to say, hey, how about giving us some answers to those research questions you're asking? And thanks also to Stacy, a listener who wrote me last year to say she got a kick out of the fact that my parents listened to the podcast. I get a kick out of it too, Stacy. Reading these messages, it's clear to me that one of the reasons people dig Perry Mason is that they watched it with their families, and so they have lots of good memories of the show. If you've got a story about watching Perry with your family, let me know. As always, I love feedback about this particular episode of the podcast in general. Was there something about this episode you'd like to comment on or something you'd like to correct? You can email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. All PerryPod episodes available via Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Join us next time where we find that in Perryland, it takes a village to get violent. It's the case of the Violent Village. Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.